Hey, Brian, thanks for joining me this afternoon to talk about you and your consulting path. Would love to just kind of jump right into it. Can you tell us about your background and how you got into what you're doing now?
Yeah, awesome. Thanks, Eamon. And first, I just want to say it's a huge honor. Thank you for having me on as a guest. I really appreciate that. Yeah, so I started Aevisor Solutions back in January of this year. Having worked in procurement, supply chain, done a lot of strategy and M&A consulting work, and then ran two e-commerce businesses as a COO, both relatively large direct-to-consumer brands. And what I noticed in the market is brands get to a certain scale, usually around $1 million, where all of a sudden operations really matters. And, they were probably started by somebody brilliant at marketing and really focused on product, and operations was not necessarily their strong suit. So I work with brands between 1 and 30 million in revenue to help solve operational issues that are holding back profitability, the customer experience, or cash flow.
That's amazing. It's actually very similar to what I do, just in a different industry. What was the impetus that made you decide to go and work fractionally, vice go work for some big brand?
Yeah, so back in I was going to say back in last year in 2024, was taking a bit of a career break and was doing some interviewing, and really had a decision to make of do I want to keep working for investor-backed businesses? And in these two instances that I was interviewing and gotten pretty deep, had met the board, and I really just couldn't get my heart in it. The things that I didn't want about that I loved about those opportunities were there, but there was also a bunch of stuff that I wasn't totally in love with. And it's really fortunate to have the support of my wife, who kind of poked me and said, "Hey, when you were doing consulting and you hadn't done formal consulting in almost 20 years, you still talked about that as one of the best jobs that you ever had." So while I was taking my career break, I was doing the interviewing, and then friends were calling me and asking for help and support in different things. And in my mind, I was doing consulting. And then found out from people who are better at marketing than me that you no longer call it consulting, you call it fractional. So that's the story on how I became a fractional COO.
Amazing. How do you manage your time or manage your process as a fractional COO for multiple businesses? Can you talk to us a little bit about that? Is there anything, tell us a little bit about how you do that.
Yeah, and I would love to hear how you also do it too, because I'm always learning new and better ways. The way I do it really just comes down to a lot of solid project management. Through the sales process, will identify 10 things that need to get fixed and what's the order and priority. And then there's a lot of project management with all of the clients, and just sort of explaining to them, all right, it's going to be done by this date, or we expect the RFP by this date, and here's what the project looks like. I also check-in, schedule meetings with all of my clients at least once a week, ideally twice a week, so we know that that's always calendared. And then the rest of it just comes down to sort of time management.
Awesome. So you're really just wearing the project manager hat and then making sure the clients are informed through every step of the way. Do you have like a capacity, or do you have like a set? Because some people who work fractionally will say, hey, I'm going to work 10 hours a week with this client or 5 hours a week with this client. Do you do that, or do you just base it purely on the deliverables that you're project managing?
Yeah, so I base it purely on the deliverables, and part of it is like I've got to protect the client as well as myself, right? So there's some stuff that's going to take a lot of time, and I'm going to have to dedicate maybe if it's 40 or 50 hours just to solve one particular problem. But then there's another time a client is actually about 3 weeks ago now had an inbound issue with inventory coming in via UPS. It was coming from Pakistan, and I happened to know the right person to call, so I was able to solve that in like 20 minutes, where that could have been a 40-hour project.
Amazing. Very interesting. What kind of tools or technology are you using to support you when you're juggling multiple clients and working on potentially multiple big 40-hour issues at one time?
Yeah, so definitely the calendar. I'm set up on Google. Huge fan of Google just because of the way it's all integrated and makes everything easy. I have a simple CRM, and I use a lot of ChatGPT, and I'm not afraid to admit that, right? It is a great sparring partner and helping, just helping red team a lot of the work that I end up doing. And how about yourself, Eamon?
Yeah, so I'm also a big ChatGPT user, set up on the Google Suite as well. I have a CRM that I have used. It's called Go High Level.
Mm-hmm.
However, I'm transitioning into kind of a new CRM that's not fully developed yet, which has a lot of AI integrations with different tools that I use. So yeah, and then I have a team of virtual assistants that help me as well.
Okay, awesome. I'm curious what led you down in the I'm considering virtual assistants. I haven't pulled the trigger yet. What led you down that path?
Yeah, let's talk virtual assistants. So as I was getting into the fractional world, I was the COO for a group of 6 law firms, and the way we were able to scale those law firms was with virtual assistants from, Central America, the Philippines, India, Pakistan, and it just allowed us, we didn't need to have anybody in the office for those types of roles. So we were able to get highly motivated, qualified people at a fraction of the cost to work to full time. So I became a big fan of virtual assistants from that experience, and have continued to leverage it, ever since.
All right. So are you using them to like book meetings and do that sort of stuff, or are they working on like project work?
They have different skill sets. So I have a virtual assistant that edits these podcasts. I have a virtual assistant that books meetings, will take sales calls. I have ones that, build out different AI solutions or build out different CRM solutions for my clients. So each kind of has their specific skill set. There are some that you can get as like all-arounders, but typically you want to have them specialize in one or two things.
All right, awesome. I clearly have to do a lot more research, and I'll be sure to pick your brain.
Yeah, that'd be great. I mean, that was a good conversation. That's kind of some of the stuff I do, and some of this. What CRM do you use, by the way?
Yeah, so I picked Salesforce. I'm familiar with it from past roles. Probably not going to stick with it. It's overkill for what I need.
hmm
So,
Yeah, Salesforce is amazing. And it's also amazingly pricey as well.
yeah. That's definitely one purchase I wouldn't make.
Okay, so kind of to jump in a different direction. We're talking about Salesforce. We're talking about AI. You're managing these brands. Are you seeing anything in the way of innovation that is differentiating the different types of businesses that you're running? Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, and especially when it comes to AI, it's the brands who are doing really well. And I'm publishing a piece on this in a journal in about a month. So I just want to tease that. The brands that are doing really, really well are spending so much more time on the people and the process part of AI than they are on the technology, right? And I would say it's a little contrarian view, but my perspective is the technology's gotten close enough, right? Whether you use Claude or Chat or some other tool, the differences in models is pretty negligible. And it's really about getting the process faster and in particular the learnings quicker, right? So the faster you can iterate and learn new information, incorporate it into that next campaign, incorporate it into how you do demand planning and forecasting and all of that stuff, the faster you get that flywheel moving with really good data, that becomes a protective moat. It's also a cultural change, right? Where it's now you start to look at the organization and the system as knobs and levers to kind of push and pull and do various tests on, and not so much thinking around OKRs, KPIs. I mean, you still have all of that stuff in the background, right? But you're thinking about how can I move your primary focus is how do I move the flywheel faster and learn quicker. And if you can learn faster than your competition and make quicker implementation decisions, that's when you're really going to see massive amount of benefit. To kind of bring that home to a tactical sort of example, just the way most brands buy performance marketing, right? So I think of that as like Google AdWords or whatever, is they pay for certain key terms and they'll pay up to a certain price. A simplified example to all of the marketing friends out there. But when you start to say, let's do things a little bit differently and not look at return on ad spend or what people call ROAS, but you start to look at the profit, and then you marry that up with the inventory position. You marry that up with the cash flow, and you start to marry your marketing decisions with all of these other pieces of information, and you get Google to sort of feed that up. You find that you can really make 15-20% higher conversion. So for 15% more of everybody who visits is going to end up buying from you.
That's incredibly interesting. So you're basically feeding, the non-traditional marketing data points back into Google to get, to enhance your conversion rate.
Yeah.
Amazing. Amazing. I love what you said about how the people in the process needs to be correct before you just slap AI onto it. I've seen people just get AI tools for the heck of it and have no idea what they're going to do with it once they get those tools. So I definitely appreciate that. How do you navigate the change management component of bringing in new people, processes, or technology into the companies that you're running?
Yeah, and that's actually the hardest part of AI. And so I would say there's two problems you have to solve, and each requires a slightly different answer. The first problem is AI is going to take my job. I don't want AI. And you see that in e-commerce a lot in the customer service space. And what I end up trying to do there is involve the CSRs and the actual implementation, because what you're doing is you're taking them from what's effectively low value work. I mean, it's important, but it's not the hardest sort of problem solving issue of, somebody emails you and asks, what's your return policy? AI can handle that, right? And so you involve them in that implementation. And as the implementation starts to go on, what you do is you move each person off and put them onto higher value work. So if you have 4 people working on the implementation, when one rolls off, they're rolling off onto this other new job that didn't exist, 6 days ago. And by the second or third person, the organization starts to understand that, hey, you know what, AI is not going to take our job away. So that's problem one. Problem two is a little bit harder, and it's sometimes more difficult one-on-one conversations with folks. Is they're uncomfortable with giving some of the decision making over to AI, right? So if you go back to the marketing example, how all of those data points get included into the feed that you hand over to Google AdWords, you can have a lot of angst of, maybe there's a CFO or a CMO who feels like they're losing control and you're taking some of their power away. And so that becomes a much more sort of one-on-one coaching conversation.
That's very well said. I love how, maybe the lower value add work, you're actually transitioning those people into higher leverage work once AI takes over. That's incredible. I'm glad you're doing that. When you're talking to the CMOs, the CFOs, though, how do you persuade them to see the value in using the new tools, and keep them away from, I guess, trying to stay relevant in their mind, for lack of a better term?
Yeah, and I really like how you said stay relevant. That's a good sort of good way to frame it. And I sort of go back to, look, their job as as executive within the business is to really help drive the business forward. So we first say, okay, are we aligned on the overall goal that the business wants? More revenue, more profit, more customers. And you say, great, okay, now we're going to use AI as a tool to get there. Do you believe AI can sort of do what we're setting it up for? And they say yes or no. Let's, for the sake of argument, say they say yes. Then you start to go down questions to understand, well, is it, are we going too fast? Or is it a concern over loss of turf or loss of relevance? And really try to diagnose it down to, is it a skill capability or issue, or is it a lack of desire? And if it's skill capability, I feel like we can address that. If it's a lack of desire, then hey, let's have a conversation about where is the business headed, and if it's not something that you can support, then let's have that conversation.
Interesting and insightful. When you take on a new client, or maybe you've been working with a client for 6 months to a year, you're probably implementing some of the stuff, solving the problems. How do you measure your success and outcomes when you're working, with your clients?
I mean, I would say it's not necessarily a standard like template way. I'm not huge on templates. What I end up doing is going back to in the initial sales conversations, we identify say 10 issues and what's the dollar value of fixing each one of those issues. And to the extent there's a dollar value, sometimes it's not all easy to put dollar values on. And then, when you go back and you do a look back, you said, okay, we're going to fix inventory and that's going to free up $200,000 worth of cash flow. You can easily go back and say, well, how much did it actually free up? And did we overestimate or underestimate, and why? So I end up putting a lot of those reports back together for my clients and update them a couple of months after, say we thought we would have fixed inventory.
Nice. Are you just building those reports out for yourself, or are you, using chat to help you? Like what's that process look like?
I build them for myself to make sure, like I'm doing a right by my clients. Also, of course, it's becomes shameless marketing plugs. So I would say I definitely use chat a lot in terms of I've trained it on my writing style. I've trained it on how I think. It's got SOPs for all of that. So it can do a halfway decent first draft of what those reports look like. And it's a good, and if you tell it to be brutally honest in your instructions, it gives you good feedback. It doesn't always give you glowing you're amazing type of answers.
Amazing. So you talked about building out ChatGPT with your knowledge and whatnot. Like, are you using that? Are you using projects? Are you building agents within? Like, talk to me about that a little bit.
Yeah. So you can definitely do it with agents. I would say that for most people, that's going to be overkill. The simplest way is just to build a lightweight, what's called RAG system. So RAG is Retrieval Augmented Generation. You can do that in Google Drive. So in Google Drive, you create a folder and you say, here's examples of what good looks like. So maybe it's 5 emails you really like or 10 project write-up reports. And then what you end up doing is in your project folder, is you give ChatGPT or Claude, whichever model, the instructions, hey, I want you to go look at those 10 reports I gave you, understand them, analyze them for tone, structure, content, pacing, all of that information, and apply that knowledge to this particular brief and write that report.
Amazing. Yeah, I'm going to definitely take some notes from that. That's a great. RAG is the acronym.
Yeah, RAG is the acronym. Like Fiscal.ai, Harvey, they're all kind of RAG based. Using Google Drive, and my example of 10 things that you actually like is a $0 way to kind of build what others have spent 80 or $100 million of VC money building.
I like that. So, Brian, I know you started basically a year ago, kind of word of mouth. How do you get new clients now, or do you just have like a set amount of clients that you're comfortable with, or what's the situation like now?
Yeah, it is 100% word of mouth referral. I mean, the most I do is I publish content on LinkedIn. My website, I built it because a friend told me like they couldn't hire me because the board said no because I didn't have a website. So I was like, okay, I'll fix that by Monday. The website looks like an operations person built it. That's something that as I look to grow the business and start doing outreach maybe next year is something that I definitely know that I need to fix.
I will say I liked your website, but I am an operations person, so maybe that's why. Brian, we talked about a little bit about next year. Where do you see yourself in the next 6 to 12 months? Like, what's the ideal version of you and your business? Talk to us about that.
Yeah, I mean, I think the ideal version of me and my business, serving and working with more clients. For sure, and have a top of funnel. That's kind of my current focus is filling the top of the funnel more. So have that issue solved and working with more clients. I mean, the way I'm set up, I'm not going to be a volume based shop, right? 8 maybe 10 clients a year is all that I would really have the bandwidth for.
Got it. And I'm sure you've got several problems or obstacles or issues, as any business does. Or your clients, I'm sure, have plenty of those as well, which is why they're hiring you. If you could wave a magic wand and fix one obstacle that would be most impactful, like what would that be?
Yeah, I would say for most of my clients, I mean, almost exclusively, is really understanding how the metrics they're tracking at, say, sub $1 million in revenue versus 1 to 5 million or 5+ million needs to change. What ends up catching most e-commerce businesses off guard is how much the cash conversion cycle matters and how tight that ends up getting. So, typical e-commerce world view is as you're growing the business, you scale up headcount, right? So you add people and then you need to go buy more inventory. And what ends up happening is if you're not managing that super carefully, you very quickly run out of cash or cash gets incredibly tight. And it's a different set of metrics that people need to track.
Interesting. Yeah, cash flow is, the lifeblood of any business. Do you have like a couple key metrics that you differentiate between, sub $1 million? I mean, you gave kind of the brackets there. Like, do you have those in your head, or is it?
Yeah. So definitely, it's for sub 1 million. It's first order profitability. If you aren't first order profitable, you're really going to be in trouble. 1 to 5. That's when you can start looking at lifetime value of the customer. Yeah, because hopefully you've been around long enough for people to have like repeat purchases and buy rates. I think across all of those, you still have to track your acquisition costs or what people in marketing call CACs, and then a 13-week rolling cash flow forecast. If your bookkeeper or CFO is not putting that together, you should ask them to. And then finally, I think the margin of the business is stuff that by the time you get to 1 million, maybe 2 million at the latest, is you need to be looking at your margins getting better.
Interesting. Yeah, well said. You definitely have that mapped out. Okay, I know you jumped into fractional life recently, but you had a consulting past. Do you have any advice for somebody who might want to, leave the W-2 and become a consultant of some type or even a coach of some type? What advice would you give those people?
I would say try to build the business while you have your W-2. So my background's not in sales. I've had to learn selling over the last, 11 months. And so having the freedom and flexibility that a W-2 would allow is going to be huge. It's going to take a lot of pressure off. Or vice versa, maybe you already know how to sell, but delivering the work might be something that you need to, skill set that you need to go learn. So advice, bit of recommendation 1 is build it with a W-2. Recommendation 2 is just get out there and start networking 12, 18 months before you actually need it.
Yeah, that's great advice. Well, Brian, if somebody is interested in looking you up, what's the best way to find you, your company, etc.?
Yeah, so the best way to find me is on LinkedIn, Brian O'Connor, Aevisor Solutions. That's Aevisor Solutions. Or aevisorsolutions.com.
Awesome. Well, Brian, I appreciate you taking the time to talk to me today. It was very interesting and insightful, and best of luck to you going forward.
All right, excellent. Thank you. And I appreciate the opportunity to be here and really enjoyed our conversation, Eamon.
Likewise.